Good evening, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. Lou Maxon here in my living room. Today in Henderson is hot. It's rabbits bursting in flames hot. If a dog goes out in front of the camera, they're hot too. The mercury hit 115, 116. It's hot today. If you see me look down at the ground, I'm looking at my brain, my iPod. I've got for you my 10 favorite knots. Alright, so here we go. Number one most favorite knot of all times is an overhand knot. There you go. Overhand knots are incredibly useful. They are the starting of many other knots, and by themselves they're a stopper in a line. They can do all kinds of stuff. Max, no. Dog. Number two is figure eight knot. Start with a bite in a line. There's a bite. Come around and then up through. Figure eight knot, it's a climbing knot. Thusly it looks like a figure eight. That's why it's called a figure eight. It's a climbing knot. You would back feed it. I'll back feed it for you. Let me lengthen it out some. Give me enough to back feed. Back feed it through your harness and tie it around yourself. There is a back-fed figure eight, or at this point, a figure eight on a bite. Three guys in broken terrain. I'm out here in the desert. Don't have to worry about crevasses. Do have to worry about the Colorado River, and have to worry about broken terrain. Rocks and boulders are no different than a crevasse. You and a couple of buddies are out hiking. You come into a boulder field and you want to go across the boulders. That's cool. That's like way fun. Dangerous, but fun. Tie into your, if you're wearing harnesses, tie into them. The guy in the front ties a figure eight and then back feeds it through his harness. The guy in the middle, he ties a figure eight on a bite because it's in the middle of the line, clips into his harness. Guy in the end ties into a figure eight into the line, evenly spaced out. You want a little slack, but evenly spaced out, so when one dude slips, the other two can tighten up on the line and, get him out of the scenario. Or crossing a river, when he loses his feet, he can be pulled back to the end or pulled across and kept going. You can do the same thing without harnesses with bowlines. We'll get to them in a moment. Give me some time. Number three, I love this knot, square knot. I use it all the time for tying two ends together. I tie mine, I make an eye, there's my eye. I come in, around, and back through. Square knot looks like a square, but it has the ends, the tail ends. These are tail ends. These are working load ends. Tail ends, load ends. They have the tail ends on the same side. If you make a square knot with the tails on opposite sides, that's not a square knot. It'll pull apart. What that's called is a thief's knot. It was when sailors back in the day had ditty bags and they'd tie them off. They'd tie a thief's knot in it so that if somebody came in and went through their stuff, they knew somebody had done it, because the guy probably thought it was a square knot and tied back in a square knot. The difference between the two. The other knot that it gets messed up with, and sometimes happens, is a granny knot. I got to work at it to tie a granny knot. Don't hold. Figure eight, square knot, clove hitch. A hitch and a knot. A knot, go back, explain the difference. A knot will hold itself in the line. It doesn't fall apart. A hitch, we'll tie a clove hitch here real quick, has to be around something, has to be tied to something, because they'll fall apart. So a clove hitch, make a loop, come over, we have an X, we'll get this in front. You see the X, and then underneath, like such. Clean it up, flatten it out, there's your clove hitch. You can tie them around sacks, you can tie them around trees, you can tie them around posts, anything that you need like that would work. A sheet bend, great knot, sheet bend, used for tying two different size line. This is 8mm rope. I normally would carry this as a ridge line in my camping equipment, and paracord. If you needed to extend the two out, my paracords are cut in 25-foot sections. If I needed 75 feet, you could tie this with the paracord with a sheet bend, because they are designed to tie knots of different size lines. Start out with an eye, just like I do with my square knot. There's my eye. Come through, around, and instead of going back in and having a thief knot, you would go under, pull the tail out, and there is your sheet bend. Fisherman and a double fisherman knot. I use fisherman's for making loops. If I need to take a piece of, with this I'd use a double fisherman, with paracord I'd use a single fisherman. I'm going to make a loop in a line, a couple of feet long, make a loop, use it for Prusik later. I'll show you how that works. We tie an overhand knot, take the other end, come through the overhand knot, tie another overhand knot around that, tighten them up, there's a fisherman. A double fisherman works better on big line like this. So we've got one around, two around, and through. One around, two around, and through. Double fisherman. Dog in the frame. Use a double fisherman to tie a loop. This rope's 25 feet long. With a loop like that, we're down around 12 feet. Big loop. You could use it as an anchor if you were doing some rappelling. I've used big rocks as anchors. Tie a big loop in something and then go from there. You know, tie your anchor and then rope into that. Oh, good times, good times. Number 7. Number 7 is a sheep shank. Sheep shanks start as a Z. It's used for shortening a rope, shortening line. Start with a Z. Take a half hitch over one end. Take a half hitch over the other end. There's a sheep shank. Used for shortening lines. Dog through the frame again. You have two eyes that you could run back through and cinch up on both sides. If you tied off one end to an anchor up top, going down an incline, I wouldn't say vertical, but going down a decline, a steep decline, not 90 degrees, but a steep decline, you could, if I straighten this one up some, pull on it, you'll find the one that doesn't have a load on it. These two have a load, the one in front of my finger does not. You could cut that. Now you have a suicide sheet bend, sheet shank, not bend, sheet bend and sheep shank. I get them confused, work with me. Cut that, you have a suicide sheet bend, sheep shank, damn it. You could go down the incline, shake it out, and get the rest of your rope down there. and you'd only lose a small section as your anchor up top. Um, Dangerous, incredibly dangerous. But when you need to go down a hill or down an incline, you got to weigh your options. If I free climb this and I fall, I could really get hurt and die. If I do a suicide sheet shank, I have my rope left over because I don't know if when I'm gonna need that again. I will need it again, but I don't know when. There we go. There's a more clean. So you cut the one in the middle. But if it were to lose tension, it could fall apart. So you definitely got to keep tension on it. Next up, the bowline knot. A bowline is a knot that makes a loop in the end of the line. So we start with an overhand loop, come through with the tail, the working end, and the load end. This is the load end or tail. Come around the load and then back through the hole, and you have a bowline. Alright? Every Boy Scout that I've ever met, and I was one, and every Boy Scout that will ever be, has to be able to tie one of these around his waist. I can't do it. Never was able to. But I can tie one big enough that will go through or around my waist, and I can step into it. The idea is if you're at the bottom of a cliff or you fell into a crack, you could tie a bowline around your waist, hold on to it, and get pulled out. You want to be sitting on that bowline. If your legs get straightened out, now the thing's up around your armpits, so you got to hold on to it, suck your elbows in, so you get pulled out. Very uncomfortable, viciously uncomfortable. Better way to go, there's lots of bowlines, but my favorite for that scenario is called a French bowline. Long line. You make one loop, come around and make a second loop. I realize you won't be able to see it. You'll see the end result here because I'm doing this on the floor. You have two loops in it. There's your bowline with a second loop. Single line, second loop. You can stick your legs through them. Put the knot in your crotch, hold onto the rope, and get pulled out. Much safer. I like that a lot better. What's up next? Gone through that. A half hitch. Yeah, we'll do the Prusik next. A Prusik knot, used in my world, this piece of rope is my ridge line for my camp outfit when I'm using my poncho. I'll take a couple of pieces of paracord, make a couple of loops a foot or two long, and then tie them around this. The end, I've tied a fisherman's knot in, put it through the eyelet on the grommet on my poncho, put a toggle through it, and slide the Prusik up and tighten up my poncho. So we start with the middle of the rope, come over, that's a cow knot. One loop, untangle this a little bit. One loop is a cow knot. I'll put my arm through. Give me a minute, we gotta use my teeth here. There's 6 loops, and those 6 loops would pull up, which should be tied off. They go through the grommet, and it cinches up. A great movie that you'll see the Prusik knot used in is a Clint Eastwood movie called The Eiger Sanction. He uses that, falls down the rope, takes his shoelaces, ties a loop in them, ties a couple of Prusiks, and uses the Prusiks to go back up the line. I've done it on rock climbing adventures, works out great. I mean, it's much older technology, simpler technology, and cheaper than a couple of ascenders. Last but not least on my group of 10 is a half hitch. Half hitches come in pairs, so we have 2 half hitches. You've tied this, you've done this around a tree, a line, come through. There's 1 half hitch. There's 2 half hitches. Cinch them up, and there you go. Thanks for your time and energy, guys. There's my top 10 knots for camping and outdoor adventure. Have a great evening.